Hey everybody, it's Kevin and Kristen from RPH Ally and the Point of Care Testing and Lab Services show today. And one thing, Kristen, we were talking about, you and I talked about a lot of interesting things, but this one was related to space. So a lot of pharmacy owners, looking at footprints, I've worked in a lot of rural settings that it was like a broom closet with medications, kind of deal. And pharmacy owners, when I was talking to the other day, said something like this: Kevin, like point of care testing seems interesting, but costs are always one thing, but space is a big one. Like, where am I going to put the machinery? Where am I going to put my staff? All of that stuff, Kristen. So can you help us with how are we going to leverage our current small spaces we may have?
Yes, definitely. So I love this topic. Hello, everyone. And it's great because you can literally mimic what you already do with immunizations. So one of the things that people need to keep in mind is that although not every state has this requirement, it is good to keep your testing supplies and processing separate from your prescription area, right? So some states specify that, and that's something that you would definitely get knocked on if somebody were to come and audit you. So it's good to know, but most states don't really even dive into that information. So it's just a good practice, right? To kind of keep your testing stuff in a separate area from your prescription activity.
What does this mean?
Some
or just designated area, Kristen?
Well, some will say you can't have it on your prescription counter space.
Yep.
And some will even say you have to have it in a separate room. But a lot of the pharmacies, there's a little nook somewhere, or you have an office that has counter space. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
But the point is that maybe we want to separate it from our prescription activity, especially our main line prescription activity. And then also, you don't need a lot of space, though. Honestly, you can start with like 2 feet of counter space. And that is plenty of space to get started with point of care testing, especially if you're not doing a huge volume to begin with, like we kind of were trying to navigate with COVID initially. We're just, trying to actually segue this into our day-to-day business model year round from here going forward. So you can absolutely handle several tests at one time on like 2 feet worth of counter space, because these devices tend to be really small. So honestly, most of them aren't much bigger than like a bottle of water. You have your device sitting there, and you do need some like storage space, whether it's drawers or cupboards, where you're keeping your testing supplies and your PPE, like gloves and stuff like that. But even with all of that into consideration, you do not need a lot of space. Like whatever I would be able to touch standing right here without moving would be plenty of space, honestly.
Wow. Okay. I mean, so when you're saying space too, Kristen, like where should the space be? Because usually in a pharmacy kind of setting, when I'm breaking it down in my mind, if someone has compounding already, they've got a compounding area, they might have a long-term care area, they might have the main like retail pharmacy prescription area, then they've got their front end, where they've got a various like number of products. When we're looking for the designated space in the area that we would want to put point of care testing, where in those regions would you say it should be? Should it not be on the patient side of the counter and needs to be back in another designated area?
Yeah, so some places have a nice consult room, so that's a great place to physically do it. Other places, come on, we've made it work with immunizations with like the divider boards. I say do the same exact thing. Have a little caddy that has all of your stuff that you need. Again, just think immunization. You put your gloves on, you have your alcohol swabs right there, your sharps container, same exact thing. Just make up a little caddy so that if you don't have the convenience of a consult room, you're just taking all of your stuff out there. I've even seen pharmacies leave it out there, and it's kind of behind one of those divider boards, and the public doesn't tend to touch it. I mean, so if you're in that situation, just leave it there. But otherwise, you have a small caddy with all of your stuff, and you take it out to the patient, you do the testing that needs to be done, and then you take it all back, including the sample that you've just collected, and you do it all in the back of the pharmacy. So nobody's actually watching you do any of that. And I like to use, maybe Kevin, one of our future videos will have to be on some of my favorite products on how to kind of navigate all of this. But I like to use very small plastic bins where I put all of my patient information for that particular test into the one bin, just like we do with prescriptions. Medication for person A goes into a basket. And it's just like the same thing. And the beautiful thing about all this is that there are no personnel requirements for the majority of states whenever we're talking about this testing. And so what that means is that anybody in your pharmacy, as long as they're trained and you have documentation of that training, then they can perform these tests. You, as the pharmacist, do not have to do these tests.
Wow.
Yes.
So space sounds easy, Kristen. Like we can find a space, we can make it work, right? When we're talking about what to put in the space, you showed us like a little water bottle and what to really put there and make sense. Now that I know that anybody on my staff can utilize this as long as I have the appropriate policies and procedures and training behind them to do so. And I've got my little like phlebotomy kit, basically, like thinking about someone coming around the hospital and have a little kit that's ready to go and you can bring out to that space to have, your testing going. What things are worth taking that space up with, Kristen? I know that, we've got a public health emergency announcement that's, right in the air there. I think it was a May date that we could be able to pull and repeal some of those things back. A lot of people nervous about the changes that's going to have to lots of things, including point of care testing. So is it worth me putting COVID testing or other things out there, or is that going to be a concern?
So I think that with the public health emergency due to end in May, there are some things that we need to realize, and that primarily has to do with COVID testing. COVID and the testing and all the devices and so on and so forth are under an emergency use authorization. So they technically don't have that FDA approval that all the other point of care tests, these waived tests that we're talking about, already have.
Got it.
So, will pharmacists be able to continue testing? Well, yes, because that it's not changing. That public health emergency didn't afford pharmacists the ability to be lab directors and test people with waived tests. It just kind of opened up those doors, like we've said in the past, to the opportunity to test and really actually use this as a service for the public. And so that public health emergency only pertains to COVID things. So to answer your question, I don't know what's going to happen with nobody. I don't think any of us really know what's going to happen with the vaccines, what's going to happen with all those tests. Really, what's going to happen with everything that has an emergency use authorization right now. Right. So I don't think anybody really has that answer yet. But
just find out, where you can find it. Point of care testing show, and we'll let you know. But
yes, it'll be here.
Uncertainty there when it comes to like, basically the question mark is, will COVID testing still be CLIA waived? It'll still be a test available, but what status it has in terms of CLIA waiver or not in the testing realm, that's the question that we still need answers for. So let's move on to other tests that we know will remain CLIA waived. No questions behind it. Still huge demand. The one that pops in my mind like immediately, A1C. Like we have a ton of diabetics out there, growing population, which we'd love to be able to curve with lots of things. But how much space does that take up, Kristen? Is it worth doing A1C testing? Like, is that a valuable product to have?
Yes, it is such a valuable product to have. And since those doors have been opened, wide open for us, the public is ready to, just go and get another test and see what is going on with their body in different ways. So A1Cs, it's a little device, probably no bigger than your phone, just very similar to a glucometer. And so you do a simple finger prick, again, like you would if you were going to be testing your glucose levels, but instead we're testing A1C. Nice. And we'll have the results. And I think it's about 15 minutes or so. And it's highly accurate, highly reliable. And the beautiful thing, too, if you're worried about cost, well, okay, how much is this device going to cost me, Kristen? It is $10 per test, give or take. Now, if you buy the smaller package, because you're not really sure how well this is going to go, about $15 per test. But you can sell these A1C tests for anywhere between $30 and $45 per test.
Wow.
So you figure you have a markup of what, $20 to $35, depending on how you want to sell it, what your market is willing to pay. And then what does that end up looking like for your business on a monthly basis?
I mean, if I have something the size of my phone that can give me a 200% return right, on what I'm doing, sounds like a no-brainer. When I know the patients are going to need it, right? And it can then make me a bigger part of their overall care picture. If I'm looking to go into clinical services and other things along those lines. But Kristen, tell me this piece. Let's say that we do have A1C in place, or we're going to add A1C like to the counter. When it comes to who's gathering an A1C and what you're doing with that information and how you're kind of corresponding with the provider, and I know we're running up close to time, so this is my last question, but how do we bridge that gap, Kristen? I feel like that is an often like pushback element. Maybe we should save it for another episode, but let's just use it in the space element here. Yes. I don't have the space for it because I feel like I'm going to offend my provider that I work with or the office that I'm next to.
Yeah, I think, no, that's great. We definitely need to dive into this in another show for sure. But we want to make sure we know, people beat this until I don't know. We know as pharmacists that we can't diagnose. That's not what we're doing. We're not diagnosing.
So in other words, until next time, we do have the space for it, and we're going to tell you.
We do. Yes.
Okay, love it. Kristen, anything for everybody else before we sign off?
No, if you still need your CLIA application, we're doing one more round. The most recent live round was fantastic. Great response. And so I'll put the link. It'll be on Tuesday, February 21st at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll show you how to fill it out or change it if you need to.
Perfect. We'll get that link on Kristen's channel on RPH Ally in the lab services and point of care testing channel. Anything else that you guys need, just let us know through there, and we look forward to seeing you next time. If you have any questions, shoot them our way.
Bye, everyone.